Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build a truck. More specifically, I'm building this 28mm scale plastic wargaming kit from Rubicon, which can be used to build either a ZIS 150 or a ZIL 164, both of which are Soviet 4x2 4-ton trucks. They are very similar to each other. The back of the box has a picture of both of them, and if it wasn't for the labelling, I don't think most people could tell them apart. At least not at a glance. I've chosen to build the ZIS 150, which is the earlier version. It began production in 1947, so it may not be especially relevant for World War II gamers like myself, but that's okay. It's still a cool truck, and it should be a fun model to build. Inside the box, we have a mostly one-piece cab and engine covering doodad. I think this looks really good, and obviously, being mostly one piece, it makes the cab much easier to assemble. That mesh detail on the rear window looks particularly nice. There's a lot of good detail on the parts that come on the sprues too, which is not at all surprising. Rubicon just keep getting better and better at what they do, and while this is a gaming kit, it's pretty well suited for display too, for all but the most picky of modelers. Not only is the detail very nice, but the parts are moulded quite well too. The mould lines are minimal, though they are present. Fortunately, most of the cleanup you'll be doing is removing the nubbins where you clip the parts off the sprue, so if you do that neatly, you'll barely have to do any cleanup at all. On this second sprue you can see there are two radiator grille parts, and that's the main difference between the two versions of the truck. Also, there are figures, and while I won't be using them, they do look quite good, though in fairness, everything on these sprues looks good. There's also a decal sheet. There's quite a lot of license plates here, so if you're looking to build a swarm of trucks, you probably won't have to repeat any numbers. And of course, there's some instructions. These are pretty typical of Rubicon's instructions, which is to say they're quite good. Everything is well laid out and easy to understand. Old Herbert only encountered minimal confusion. Alright, it's time to glue some bits of plastic together, starting with the bumper, and right away, a choice must be made. The bumper being the other difference between the two variants. I've chosen to build the ZIS 150, which means I glue these two hook bits into place, and then onto the front, the actual bumper part. Nothing too tricky going on here. The bumper can then be mounted onto the frame. These parts have good keying, so it should be pretty hard to get this wrong. Next, I put the front leaf springs on. This kind of bridges between the front of the frame and the bumper part. The front and rear recesses for these leaf springs are different, so you probably won't have any trouble figuring out which way around they go. Why not follow that with the rear leaf springs? The mounts for these aren't quite like the front set, so it was a little bit more tricky to determine which way around they should go, but I think I figured it out. On the rear left of the frame, I add this thing. I don't know what it is, probably a license plate holder. It may need a bit of nudging, but it's pretty easy to get into place. I then glue the fuel tank together. This is made up of two parts which pretty much just drop right together. Easy as pie. Is pie easy? Then I assemble the steering doodadery. You'll make life a little bit easier for yourself if you assemble this and then leave it to bond for a bit before putting it on the frame. In the meantime, I add the rear differential axle part, and you might think to yourself, boy, that looks pretty simple. And that's because it is. The towing hook might as well go on at this point too. Those protrusions at the end did make it a bit hard to get my fat fingers in there. Maybe try using tweezers. Next, I put the fuel tank on here. It's probably a good idea to install this the right way up, otherwise it's going to be painful to fuel the truck up. I then add the steering axle assembly thing. A bit of nudging might be needed so everything is nice and neat. While that bonds, I turn my attention to the cab, and the installation therein of the windshield. This did need a little bit of trimming and cleanup, more than any of the other parts did, but once that's done, it clicks into place quite well, though you will still want to add some glue, you know, to please the glue god, and so that it stays there. Here's those crew figures that I won't be using. There is something I quite like about these. You can see the steering wheel has a tab on it, which corresponds with a slot in the front of the crew figure. This looks like it would make putting the driver figure together really easy, and I just think that's a really good design. I'm not using the figure because they're bad, I just don't like people. If you are adding crew though, now would be the time to do so. I did, of course, add the cab details. These levers go here, and they're all conveniently mounted on a little plate. Next to that, I add the gear shifter. And then the steering column, which has a little bracket at the bottom to help you mount it at the correct angle. It probably makes some sense to put the steering wheel on the end of the steering column. Going back to the frame, I add this mudguard assembly. I wasn't totally sure where this should sit. There are tabs on the bottom that look like they should guide it, but if they're intended as such, they don't seem to work properly. Then I put the cab interior part on. Just to make sure everything is right, I test fit with the cab, and it all seemed to fit pretty good. I install the headlamps next, and it seemed to me like it would be a bit easier to put these on now, before the engine compartment goes on and is in the way. The spare wheel then goes into place here. Now it's time to build the cargo holdy bit, and you have to make another decision here. You can build this with or without the canvas cover. I've clearly chosen the cover. I start at the forward end, and it's pretty easy to get this into the correct position, but just to be sure, I quickly put a side part on so that I know it lines up properly. Now that we've got the first corner nicely together, the rest pretty much just plops right into place. But now, if you've built the covered version, you have to make yet another choice. An open or a closed rear flap. I've chosen closed. I did have to apply pressure to minimize gaps here, and it will need some putty work later on, but it does look pretty good. Obviously I haven't put the roof part on, so why not do that? The roof does have a particular way around that it should be installed. If the ridges don't line up first try, rotate it and try again. You'll get it eventually. On the underside, mud flaps. There are 4 of these to stop mud in all directions. Well, front and rear directions. Now it's time to put the grille part on, and there are 2 of these to choose from, though, really, the choice has already been made. I'm using the grille that goes with the ZIS 150 bumper. You could of course use the other grille, but the Soviet Truck Grill and Bumper Society will be very angry if you mix those parts up. You don't want to mess with them. Next, I glue the cab assembly into place. The mirror comes next, and the chonk at the bottom should make it pretty hard to position this in correctly, though there is a bit of play to it, so you may have to do some nudging. Why not follow that with the cargo compartment? There are guide pins along the bottom of this, which, believe it or not, help guide the part into the right place. A lot of trucks have wheels, and this one is no exception, so let's add them. The front wheels are comprised of 2 parts, and the keying makes this pretty simple. The rear wheels are also comprised of 2 parts, and they also have keying, which also makes it pretty simple. They do look a bit different though. While I let the wheels bond so they're good and strong, I glue these boxes into place here. Presumably, these are stowage for extra vodka, and certainly not things like tools, only vodka. The wheels are really easy to put on. The rear ones have D-shaped keying, so if you're doing it right, the little rods on the axle bit should line up with the doodads on the inside of the wheel, which I figure is the braking system. And obviously the front wheels come next. These have keying too, though there is a bit more play here. The wheels really make it look like a completed truck, and that's because this is now a completed ZIS 150. Should it be said ZIS or ZIS?
Do you really care, Herbert?
Maybe a little bit. Anyway, the 28mm ZIS 150 4x2 4-ton truck in plastic from Rubicon Models is completed. I quite like it. It's a simple truck, and while I don't really have any forces for games where this would have a place, it is still a nice model. This truck is intended for Rubicon's Vietnam game. Though, of course, if you don't want to use it for wargaming, it would still make a nice display piece, perhaps as part of a diorama. It was a good, fun kit, and I don't have any real complaints about it, but it would have been cool if it included some stowage. A load for the cargo area would have been cool. Obviously, you could make your own, but I do think it's nice when kits come with stowage.
You built it closed, Herbert.
Well, yeah, I did, but I might not have if there was something interesting to put in the back. Anyway, that's not even a complaint really, more of a thought that I had that I've just kind of waffled about while we watched the model spin. I rather enjoyed this build. It was a lot of fun, and it was nice and quick too, just what the doctor ordered, assuming your doctor is incompetent and prescribes plastic kits instead of medical treatment. I'm really waffling now. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. If you'd like to watch me build kits like this one live, I live stream modelling a couple of times a week, both here on YouTube and on Twitch. Twitch even has a handy dandy schedule that you can check out. There's a link in the description. Subscribe if you want. And if you really like what I do, consider supporting on Patreon or Ko-fi. Links for those are in the description too. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.